We are continuing on our HollyShorts bandwagon. Super happy to be doing that, even though the festival's over with, because there's just so many directors that are fascinating. Case in point, our lovely filmmaker right here, Drew Bierut. Thank you so much for being patient. I'm super excited to talk about Bob. I wasn't sure I was going to like it, and then I fell in love with it. So thank you for being here. I
Thanks,
appreciate it.
Cindy. Yep, happy to hear that. Great. I'm happy to
Absolutely.
talk to you.
You betcha. First question I want to ask off the top of my head is oftentimes the people that are in our lives from a personal standpoint have some effect on us professionally. I want to talk a bit about your dad. I know that your dad's influential in your life. And tell me a bit about the sorts of things that he has passed on to you that have been helpful to you professionally.
Yeah, sure. My dad has shown me that you don't need to make a hardline choice between doing something artistic and doing something professional. He has shown me that, you can choose your passion and you can choose your art and make a career out of it, which has been like a really inspiring thing. My dad is a graphic designer and he's done a lot of great work, and it's a lot of work that probably anyone watching this could be familiar with. So he's a great role model for me in that he really just is his job. He is and breathes and lives the embodiment of his job. And it's inspiring to see what he's done with it and how respected and loved he is in his community, in his graphic design community. So I try to, it's not quite the same thing in the film world as graphic design. Like I like to joke with my dad, all that he has to do is create little 2D images. That's child's play, that's nothing. But but no, there's a lot to glean from it. And I think whether it be family members or significant others, it's really nice when they do something similar to you, but that isn't exactly the same,
Sure.
without it being a 100% match, because then you're
Absolutely.
not overly competitive or comparative or at each other's throats with things.
Sure. Understood completely. And I know you're a New Yorker. So, of course, I'm gathering that he's a New Yorker as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, so he grew up in the Midwest. My dad did, but moved to New York just out of college and was the first in his family to do so. And then I'm from that area too.
I've gotcha. So we've talked a lot about this, and most of the filmmakers I've spoken to are from LA. And I know that you're a New Yorker, and things in New York are different. I call myself a New Yorker as well. I pretty much am. New York and
Yeah,
LA are
I can
not the
tell from the
same.
speed of how you talk.
Yeah, I know I'm guilty of that. And my significant other was from New York as well. So it made sense. It's hard when you go to LA because it's like LA does things a certain way.
Oh
New
yeah.
Yorkers are always shuffling, they're always hustling, they're always, there's always that constant whatever. So I like to ask this question of filmmakers on the East Coast, because I've done it on the West Coast too. When it comes to standing out or standing singular and being noticed in a crowd, and I mean a swarm in your case, because I know exactly how many directors, writers, producers are in New York. How do you feel that you've developed yourself to be distinguished enough to stand out in a crowd of New Yorkers in the entertainment industry?
Oh man. Well, that's always the task, isn't it? It's so competitive. So many people want to do creative things right now as the robots and artificial intelligence comes along and takes away the jobs that have nothing to do with creativity. There's more of us flocking to the stuff that has to do with our human experience and our soul and everything like that. I try not to think about what makes me specifically, worth people's attention or spotlight. I just try to answer a voice inside of me that says, this is work that's really important for me to do. It's something I've wanted to do since I'm very young, and I'm doing myself the service of trying to carry it out and continue to make film. So I think maybe something unique about the way I try to do stuff is I'm not afraid to go into deep topics, but I always try to bring some heart and some brightness and some humor to all of it, no matter how deep or dark I go.
Gotcha. Yeah, that would certainly be standing out without a doubt. Well, and the other thing with New York City I've noticed is we've all been living the same hell for basically the last 3 years, of course. So we hear about how LA gets hit, New York gets hit. I was just in New York recently, etc. There are those, and speak to this, please. There are those, even those that don't live there, that really have very serious doubts about the arts community making a comeback, because there's that balance of crime and other things happening. Where do you stand on that? And do you feel comfortable that the city can revive itself and that art is still plentiful and still something that people are passionate about?
Oh, I'm very optimistic about the perseverance of the art world and the art scene in New York and beyond. I think New York, by its nature, creates the toughest people in the world, the most stubbornly confident, stubbornly intent on succeeding people in the world, and the hardest working people in the world.
Mhm.
And so I have no concerns about where the art scene is going in New York. And I think that the best art comes from the worst of times a lot of the time. So the struggle of COVID and all the clampdown that's happened there, I think is leading to really great work. So no, I'm not, I feel no doom about the future of art going forward in New York and
I
elsewhere.
like it. I like hearing that. I do, because I'm not hearing that optimism all the time. So it's very, very good to hear that. Absolutely. So I'm guessing you're a celebrity, because when I was reading your IMDb, look at this. His alternate name. He has an alternate name. How many people do you meet that have an alternate name? Hi, Andrew, because apparently you have an alternate name. I was like, how cool is that? Celebrity guy.
Alternate name. I didn't know about
It
that.
says
Yeah.
that. Literally, it says alternate name Andrew. So I assume, is it Andrew or is it Drew, celebrity guy?
Yeah, yeah. Birth certificate wise, it is Andrew. But you know, speaking of my dad, I haven't been called Andrew since I was in trouble and him yelling Andrew, you know, as a
Ah,
kid, kid, you know, I quickly just became more of a Drew. And yeah, you know, Andrew reminds me of being in trouble or being at Catholic school, one of the two,
sure.
kind of the same thing. So
I get it. So
yeah.
now this is fascinating to me. You and I both have this influence of the camcorder. I want to talk about the camcorder because I had read about that, and I think it's fascinating from an early age. And so, talk to me a bit about how using a camcorder kind of helped you to formulate how you would do your own filmmaking. And then, second of all, tell people the days of the camcorder are not dead, are they?
No, tape and film very much alive and very much refreshing when compared to this thing that suddenly now everybody has. So it's getting kind of boring. Everybody has a phone in their pocket that can record pretty high quality video. It's clean, it's digital, it's perfect for what it is. But suddenly, like, there's kind of this lust and a desire to change it up. And I think people kind of pine for something different and something more nostalgic feeling. And that's why when people make stuff that looks more like VHS or more like film or more like mini DV tape, beta tape, any of that, it's kind of a refreshing curveball. So I think it's kind of coming back into vogue, and it's always exciting to see when people use that type of look. And yeah, like you mentioned, it's kind of the world and the look that I first learned how to do this stuff on.
Oh, you betcha. Do you still utilize it from time to time? I could picture you doing either that or like 8 millimeter. I so could.
Yeah, yeah. I have a film camera in that closet behind me. It's a Bolex, like the crank kind. So that's a
Mm.
16, and that's really fun. The tape kind, yeah. I mean, I actually just gifted my friend who I grew up making movies with one of those old, I eBayed it, but like an old camera with mini DV tapes inside of it for his wedding because I was his best man and we grew up doing little home movies together. And it was like, okay,
Oh,
I'm going to record, you know, the behind the scenes of his wedding and stuff on one of those.
absolutely.
And yeah, it's more sentimental. So I think it definitely has its place, depending on what story you're trying to tell. And yeah, I love that look. I think it's fun.
Oh, no, I don't disagree with you whatsoever. I feel like filmmakers are a lot of times kind of that mindset of they don't want to go out of their comfort zone. You know what I mean? Oh, I want to, if I try this equipment or if I try this or whatever have you, they get very situated and settled in where they are. So refreshing to hear that. This is good. Now, I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about you have done in the director's seat 5 projects, as well as alternatively producer 5, and you've done all the same projects, which leads me to believe that you are a self-financer by nature. That always makes me sad. It's impressive, but it's also sad, of course. So I'm like, okay. So I want you to talk a bit about, well, only because, I mean, let's face it, we're not all independently wealthy, right? So it's like, okay, let's say you put your heart and soul into something that doesn't work. You know what I mean? So I want to talk a bit about that. Being a director, you're in the lead of the film. Being a producer, you're in the lead when it comes to things like, I mean, there's really more besides producing than just the money aspect of it. So how do you balance that well to make sure that at the end of the day, your project looks good, is paid for, and everything's taken care of? Because that sounds exhausting to do that double duty every time.
Yeah, it's a lot. And I have the ongoing challenge of trying to delegate and and surround myself with more of a producing team to alleviate some of that so I can focus on the art, focus on the directing of it. But it's hard to separate the two as an indie director because by definition, it's always small and do it yourself. And, you got, wearing my producer cap, it's something I've gotten very used to. I started Bierut Films in like 2015, and it was kind of inspired by one of my old bosses, a filmmaker called Errol Morris. He's a documentary guy, actually.
Okay.
But I worked for him right out of college, and his model was simple. He would direct commercials and then use that money to make whatever documentaries he wanted. And so I do my branded and commercial content in a similar way, where I take the revenue from those, put it towards my own films, and write it all off for taxes, so that's kind of the model and the way that I've been able to self-finance. So yeah, it's really hard though to be able to parse out the directing role from the producing role when you're on set, because the producer is focused on so much more the logistical stuff, and
Absolutely.
directing, I want to focus on what's best for the heart of the story. And sometimes those are very at odds with each other.
Well, right. Exactly the reason I brought it up. So if you were like pushed into a corner with one of these projects and someone said, listen, Drew, you need to give up one here. I'm going to venture to guess Drew's running to the director's seat if I'm correct, but I might be wrong.
Right.
Well,
And to the extent that I can still, running to the director's seat, if there still is something to direct when I leave the producer's seat, right? Like if I have the support where other people around me, and this has started to open up for me, thankfully, in the past year or two, if I'm being honest, it's still pretty new. People do want to produce stuff with me and for me, that's great. And I welcome it, but it's kind of new but it's definitely refreshing. My heart and soul has always been in the directing side. The producing side has been a means to an end of that.
You betcha. Would you foresee yourself somewhere down the line? Because I do hear filmmakers often doing Indiegogo and some of your Kickstarters, etc. Would you dabble in that sort of thing? Because there is, 50-50 shot there. That's fair, I think, to say. Would you find that would be easier instead of actually, taking from your company to put it over here? You know what I mean?
Oh, that would be much easier in a sense that it wouldn't be my own money that I could otherwise be putting towards things like, retirement or owning my own property or putting towards my own wedding or things like that. Like, oh yeah, that would be great. The other thing is like, I don't want to ask random people or fans or just random members of an audience to put up money unless I know it's really going to be something worth it for them. So I try to emulate, like, as I look at this, I would probably only want to go into crowdsourcing when mounting my first indie feature, and probably only use it as a component of the total fundraising for it as well. I learned a lot from HollyShorts. One of the panels was called Film Financing, and they had people from Vanishing Angle there who do all types of indie film work that I love. And they had some really, really smart strategies on how to incorporate crowdfunding as part of the overall plan. So that inspired me quite a bit, and something that I would look at for the feature side. I would want to ask people to pay in a crowdsourcing way, only if I knew they'd be getting something back, almost like they were becoming like mini producers that would have some sort of back end ownership of it,
Filmmaker with a heart. Look at that. That's genuine. That's good. I like it. Okay.
Yeah.
I know that through your business, and I'm bringing this up for a reason. We both work in entertainment, and very recently someone had scolded me and literally said, I love you. You're wonderful. However, you should probably keep your political thoughts to yourself because you work in entertainment. I see that you have done political shots or shoots, I should say. I want to talk about that because there are people, and I hear it all the time. They're like, you really need to stop giving your opinion. I'm like, why? What are they going to do? I'm self-employed, right? So I'm like, I guess if they stop listening to me on radio, I'll go to this platform. So creators feeling stifled to some degree, because I do notice even in Hollywood, people get the no, and you can't really get involved or talk about this. So why, besides the monetary value of it, are you ever concerned about that impact that it could have on the other side of your life?
To me, my documentary work, which, involves working directly with reality, goes hand in hand with some of my political documentary work and my
Okay.
political work more generally.
Sure.
It's like, look, this isn't just make believe all the time. Half my identity as a filmmaker is doing real stories.
Hmm.
And to the extent that I'm making those, I'm really invested in the values behind those real stories, the message that I'm trying to tell. And that has a direct connection for me to my political values and what I believe in as well. I
Hmm.
think we're at a very high stakes moment, politically speaking, in this country.
Sure.
And I'm not afraid to, sign up my filmmaking, video making services to the side that I believe to be more reflective of my values and
Hmm.
the place where I think we should be headed. Back in 2020, I did sign up to work with a political super PAC that was behind Biden's team. And I don't have any reservations about that. I'm not embarrassed to talk about that because that was more aligned with my values. And I thought that I needed to help however I could in lending my video making and filmmaking skills. So,
Gotcha.
you know, that's that's why I've done political stuff in the past, and I'm not going to shy away from it. If I feel like it's in line with what I believe in and my values, I'm going to go for it.
Impressive. I like it. Okay. I want to switch over and talk about what I would call your mission statement. I know that you've been clear and said before that one of the main reasons you like storytelling is because it allows you to not only tell personal stories, but to use your imagination, use imagination in general to create a good story. But moreover, to serve our next generation. That's impressive also, because I think a lot of times filmmakers are concentrated on what they're doing, etc. But why is it important to you to influence or inspire our next generation of filmmakers?
Because I'm not going to be here, for hundreds of years. Everybody has their expiration date,
Sure.
and your ego is only as big as that expiration date. What's bigger and much more important is kind of your legacy, the little ripples that you leave behind. And I think that if I can make my own little waves and ripples, inspiring people to tell stories and be creative and unleash the artist inside of them, in the face of every force in their life, maybe pushing against that. I love that. I want to have a more impact than just my own life and my own story, if that makes sense. So
It
it's
does.
not just about me. It's about, like, I was kind of joking about the AI thing before and them taking everyone's jobs, but I'm kind of not too. Like, I really think as humans, we need to spend our lives doing stuff that is meaningful to all of us. And I think increasingly that's going to be on the art side. So,
Sure. Absolutely. I have to ask this because I'm like, I know your dad's in design and I know that you went to Emerson College and you got your BA in film. So was there ever kind of a like helpful little nudge like, hey son, how about art design or something relative to the occupation of design? Because film and
um,
design are similar. They really are to a large degree. I think it's very similar as far as certain elements.
well, I'm glad you asked. I always loved filmmaking, and all the way back to when I was like 7 years old. In a little time capsule that I buried, there's a questionnaire that they handed out in school where we would fill it out and then bury our answers to unearth them like 10 years later or whatever.
Sure.
And even at age 7, it said, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And it said movie director. So when I opened that and saw that as I was applying to Emerson, it was a really cool and validating experience because it was just always
Sure.
there.
Sure.
And I feel very much like I have to honor the child in me's wish and every part of me's wish to continue doing this stuff. But there was definitely times where it was questioned. My mom is more the pragmatist in my family. There
Okay.
was a time when she was the real, bringing home the bread, and my dad was just an unproven artist moving to New York with nothing to his name. And
Sure.
she was the one working in business and saying, and like holding it down for a while and making sure that, like, okay, we have a solid nest egg here to have a family. So she's a pragmatist, and she's honestly like really helpful to me on the business owning side. She's helped
Sure.
me as a small business owner. But in applying to college, I remember there was this big suggestion of, look, you can't just go for film, just like you can't just go for acting. You have to go for like film and media business, like somehow merging the two so that
Yes.
you can be like an executive or something that, works in that world, but still is kind of like a well-paid, well-respected, fancy man wearing a suit.
Sure.
And And I never got on with that. I knew like deep down inside that was just probably not going to happen. So I stubbornly just applied where I wanted to anyway, got into the school that I wanted the most. And, the rest is kind of history after that. But it's kind of interesting. It's not to say that my mom's totally wrong in that advice. Like I really glean a lot of helpful stuff from it, especially
Yep.
applying it to my business. But when it came to following through with what my major was going to be, I knew it had to be film. So
Nice. Very nice. Speaking of film, I guess we should talk about Bob. So you have done an 18-minute film, a funny film, not completely funny. There are themes we'll get into here, but it is funny. I mean, it's just for a woman who's in mourning, it was really good to watch because I'm like, this is just so, it's just so like this. Like you just shake your head, like, really, that sort of thing. So, okay. First question I want to ask about is the logistics of it. So everyone knows that you have a character in the movie that's wearing a SpongeBob outfit.
yes.
So let's talk about the technicality of that. Because a lot of times filmmakers will say, well, I couldn't use this because there's, a license on the music or license on this. SpongeBob is a licensed product. So was there an issue with that? And honestly, I want other filmmakers to hear this because oftentimes it's a limitation of them. Like they can't do this or this because it's a branded, product.
Yes, it's funny you bring that up. One of my best friends works for Nickelodeon, works for Viacom, and tells me that SpongeBob is like their do not fuck with this holy grail of all IP. It's like, it's very serious. But on the other hand, like, look, I'm an indie filmmaker making a short, and it's like if it's getting so big that Viacom's gonna come after me,
Right.
like let them, that would be awesome. Like in the world where, like breaking news, Nickelodeon versus Drew Bierut over Bob, like I would just think that was so funny, and it would be fine. Like we could handle it. But
Sure.
the real answer is I talked to some lawyers in the family, my siblings and my family in general. We all are just so passionate about different things. And
Sure.
my older sister's a lawyer, her husband's a lawyer. And I talked to them, they informed me about something called transformational use or transformative use, which
Okay.
is basically something along the lines of parody law, where if you are taking existing IP but subverting it in a certain way for the purposes of like social or artistic commentary,
Mhm.
it's doable. So
Oh,
that's what I would argue in court in the hypothetical if Viacom and Nickelodeon came after me, but we'll see.
okay. So note to filmmakers, just make sure you run it past like a lawyer or two or talk to somebody. Because I do worry about that oftentimes, because you have wonderful projects, but if they get caught somehow, not that you would, the likelihood is small, but you do have to think about that. Because I noticed during the course of the film, I caught this. When you have that line where you're talking about the crusty part of Hollywood, I was like, is he making a SpongeBob reference? Like the Krusty Krab and all that. And again, I went back to the legality. Like, does he know what he's doing? You know what I'm saying? Like, and it could be the film judge in me, but I'm like, was that purposeful? I mean, was that on purpose as a reference, or am I just thinking way too much into it?
Well, there is a Krusty Krab reference directly in the dinner table scene. Krusty part of Hollywood, I don't think was an intended reference.
Okay.
But on the whole IP issue, I was inspired by other festivals I've been to where people would raise their hand at the Q&A and say, how did you get the rights to that music? And the filmmaker would say, well, I didn't, like I just wanted to use it. I wanted to use it anyway. And I just thought, I'm like, well, here they are. Their thing's getting screened. We're not at the stage yet where we have to worry about this stuff because it's not being turned into a business quite yet. It's really just for expression and the play of it all.
Right.
So I think now, in these early stages, it's absolutely the time to take a little bit more risks in all senses, but including IP, I think.
Okay, that's what I thought. I do want to talk about, surprisingly, within the course of the movie, you happen to kind of slip in just this tiny segment of animation. So tell me why you felt as the director that it was a vital part of the picture, meaning why does that need to fit in there and why the usage of animation?
The honest answer is I was watching back the edit and unhappy with the flow and the pacing of how it went with the searching for Bob, watching him at the piano, intending for them to have this magic moment where they open up the door and see him at the piano. And then the way it was cut, minus the animation scene, which wasn't planned, by the way, it came after. It just felt kind of, it didn't feel satisfying enough. And it also felt like the police came like really quickly in time, like
Right.
in a weird way. It was actually an uncredited producer, my girlfriend Claire's suggestion to have something else be there to make for more time and help build to it. And then
Okay.
after some more, she's in the special things, but she's always my,
Of
co-producer.
course.
Anyway, yeah, I just was like, okay, let's do something that not only will handle that pacing issue, but
Right.
will also establish like more of a sentimental connection between this girl and SpongeBob and her nostalgia. And I think it kind of worked out. I came away very pleased with the animation.
Oh, absolutely. I'm here to tell you, and hopefully Baz Luhrmann won't listen to this, but I'm here to tell you that your usage of animation was so well fit, and the usage of animation in Elvis, yeah, no.
Some of the
So
other,
hopefully Baz Luhrmann won't be watching this because he'll probably hate on me. But no, I was like watching Elvis, and I don't know if you've seen it, but I'm like, there's an animated scene in here, and I'm like, Elvis animation, that's a little different. Whereas you already have animation, animated character. Yeah. If you haven't seen it, you should see it.
I haven't
Once.
seen Elvis. I've been told that I should.
Yeah, just once. Only
Just
once.
just once, okay. Copy
Because
that.
I don't want to ruin it for you. If you're familiar with Baz Luhrmann, you know he did like Moulin Rouge and some of those very big, and they're beautiful. He does wonderful with that. But Elvis is not Moulin Rouge. So when we try to turn Elvis into a Moulin Rouge, and then we cast Tom Hanks, I mean, Austin Butler though should get an Oscar. Absolutely, that was perfect. The rest of it,
all right.
oh yeah, but it's long too. So like, have cocktails and all that stuff. Listen to me. I'm like, okay, moving on. Enough about Elvis. So Bob, back to him. So again, a logistical question. Your main character spends most of the time covered. Okay, so logically, any actor is going to be like, oh my God, breathing, comfort, etc., that sort of thing. So I'm going to venture to guess you filmed this either quickly or there were breaks involved, or how did he handle that?
I knew going into it that I wanted someone I could really trust and someone who wouldn't like walk off the set because of how annoying an obstacle it is to wear that damn thing the whole time.
Right.
So Dylan Stuckey, who plays Bob, is my friend, and we worked together on a couple other projects before this. And I just was very transparent with him up front. Like, look, I have this role. I've been thinking about you the whole time with it. I think you'd be great, but it's going to be a challenge because it's cumbersome. It's a little uncomfortable. And it's kind of annoying because every actor wants to have their face on camera, right? Like this is kind of like mask work instead.
Right.
And much more to do with like physical comedy and stuff. And he said, dude, doesn't matter. I love you. I support you. Let's do it. Let's rock. And I was like, okay, that's exactly what I wanted to hear.
Awesome.
So it was somebody I trusted and I knew wouldn't like revolt. But that being said, we did have to move quickly, not really because of the costume, but because it was originally 25 pages over 3 nights that we were shooting. And that's just like a lot of pages per,
yeah, it is.
per shoot. So we ended up cutting about 7 pages out, which was a lesson of its own, by the way. Like better to do that on the front end than the post end. But yeah, Dylan, who played Bob, was an incredible trooper in wearing that suit. And I will say it was created in a way where it was so light and foam based that he could lift it on and off quickly in between takes and do rehearsals, sometimes not even wearing it. So it wasn't like he was committed and confined to it from the moment he had to put it on.
I gotcha. One more question about that. One would assume because it's a character that is licensed, it's expensive to get the outfit itself. And then second of all, was there any concern by the creator that people would get to a point where they'd almost be like, okay, this is ridiculous? Because let's think about this a minute. A logical person at some point isn't going to go to dinner or these other places. Eventually, you know what I mean? Like eventually it's going to be like, okay, already. Have we crossed over the line of absurdity? You know what I'm saying? Like, were you afraid the audience might get lost with the absurdity?
Right. That was the goal in trying to create a tone and an acting style that felt very true to life and accurate, like real people who you might know or hang out with.
Right.
Because the premise itself is, as you say, absurd. Like that someone would keep this thing on, show up, and then stay and eat dinner wearing it, and then like break into their master bedroom. All that is kind of crazy. But I wanted to cut the craziness in this soup with some very diluted with the water of like, okay, these people kind of seem real. Like these people seem like they are reacting in a way that seems true to life. So hopefully, even though the premise and the setting is kind of nuts, the people that you are engaging with in the film seem familiar.
Absolutely. I also have to say, in terms of the casting, clearly, of course, your lead, he speaks for himself clearly because he's in the costume. And if you watch it, and again, I don't want to get into too much detail because I don't want to give the premise away, the whole story of it away. I will say this much. I don't know how much time you spent casting that sister, but I just wanted to slap her. And that's the sign, by the way, of a good actor, because anyone that can effectuate strong emotion like that, in my opinion, that's impressive, I have to say. So talk to me a bit about the sister role. And were all of those worries part of the script, or was that just her kind of, I feel like you gave her some longitude to improv a bit if necessary and just kind of heighten it and heighten it and heighten it as time was going on?
Yes. So you're talking about Julia,
Yes,
played by Talia Rose Goodman. And I did take a long time. That was the hardest character to cast and the
sure.
hardest character for the film overall. I watched like hundreds of tapes and picked her out of the mountain that we received and went with Talia because she was able, in my mind, to make that role feel human and like it actually, like her perspective had some merit. And like she wasn't just sort of this crabby, sour grape, but instead, like, loves her sister and is trying to look out for what is best for her, wants things to go well and to plan. Like we all know people like that, and kind of struggles when things don't. And I think Talia does all things and then some. I think she kind of has her own, she has a comedy background for sure and
Sure.
an improv background. And I wanted to give her room to play with it. So we did a little bit. And I think she really delivered. I think the whole kind of film hinges on that antagonist kind of working out for the situation. And I'm really proud of the performance that we came away with Talia. Daniel is somebody that kind of walked into a dumpster fire and has the best intentions in the world. There's nothing inherently bad or wrong about Daniel. He's like a nice, hardworking, kind of charming, polite guy. And he kind of is like the picture perfect representation of who Julia believes her sister Hannah should be with.
Sure.
But he just is sort of a passenger along the ride of all this chaos. And one of my favorite parts in the script is when Bob acknowledges, like, I like Daniel. He seemed like a nice guy. You know, like it's just very true. Like that's what I mean when I say that these characters should feel familiar and human, you know.
Absolutely. You betcha.
So I was proud of how his name, Hugo Mejia, played Daniel.
That's right.
And I was proud of how he executed that performance.
If somebody is watching this, meaning my audience members, this is what I can tell you about the film. Some of the things that are just darling that stood out to me, the fact that SpongeBob wears these socks, these college, the socks with the stripes on them. I thought that was just totally awesome. SpongeBob does pull-ups in this. I think it's awesome. I think you should have cast your dad as the creepy guy, because I could have pictured that, like you asking your dad, would you be the creep? Because I bet he probably would have been down for that. I also
I don't know.
Oh no.
About that.
I also like, and I won't give it away, the reveal and how the reveal is done, because the reveal in and of itself, as an interpreter of film, what I was looking at was the idea of, or the ideas of, the really, besides the comedic part, Bob has to do with, again, core relationships in your life. She has a relationship with her sister and the husband, and now she has a new relationship with this new man. Now, of course, she meets this strange Bob, and we don't know what's going to happen with that, of course. But I like the fact that you throw out there that there are surprises to be found even in the strangest of circumstances. So that theme is very prevalent in there. Or don't necessarily judge something just because it's not comfortable or it's out of the ordinary for you. Those are kind of the takeaways for me. But those are just my impressions. The go-to for HollyShorts for all my interviews has been cornering the filmmaker. So I'm cornering you to tell your audience in 3 sentences, what is Bob really about?
Bob is about rolling the dice, not knowing how they're going to turn up, and being okay and open to that. It's about knowing that life is going to take your plan, knock it down, and light it on fire, and having to, still smile at that and find some joy in knowing that you can't control everything. And finally, Bob is just about being an open-minded person and treating people well and not being excessively judgmental.
Absolutely. So far, I know that you were at HollyShorts, of course. So how is it done in terms of, we probably don't know, right? Obviously, I knew that I didn't hear the word Bob at the HollyShorts Awards, which means you didn't win there. And I don't think you got nominated, right? Was that a bummer? Like you're like, darn it.
No, I was so impressed by the caliber of work at HollyShorts that to me, it was just nice to be played alongside those films. And I also just appreciated how strongly HollyShorts came back from COVID with all the panels and events.
Oh,
and
yeah.
else.
It was lovely.
Like,
Absolutely.
this is fully back. So I just thought it was a great experience. I'm still, as we speak, in touch with like a lot of the people I met there and making new connections. So, all good on the no awards thing. Everyone who did win was incredibly well deserved. So
absolutely. And where is Bob headed next as far as the circuit?
Yeah, it's headed next to the Independent Filmmaker Showcase Los Angeles, which is another sort of indie film festival that takes place obviously here in LA. And it'll be at the Regal Theaters downtown September 3rd, if you want to check it out there. So that'll be the next place it is screening and the next festival it's at.
Awesome. And as far as Drew's future plans, so what do we have in the hopper next?
Yeah, I'm cooking on a couple new short concepts because what I want to do is take a few of these shorts and build a little bit of a brand and an audience, and then leverage that into finally taking the move to create my own independent feature film. So I'm not at a place yet where I can talk about the premise of the next couple shorts that I'm looking at, but they are a little comedy related with some kind of weird dark twists as well. And I'm very excited by it. So I appreciate everybody who watched Bob and everybody who watched this interview. So thank you so much.
Well, would that mean that you're going to have Bob come back or your dad and this stuff coming up?
No, Bob to come back that I know of. I mean, SpongeBob already has his own universe. And my dad, I don't know what the obsession is here, Cindy, with my dad.
I just like
Michael.
to hint. I just like to hint. Actually, you never really know this. I never knew this, until you start talking to your family members after the fact. Once you start getting involved in film, sometimes they don't want to admit it, but they really do want to get involved. You know what I mean? Like I hear that from people like, oh, or like you're on a, you're on a set, you don't have somebody or you need something real quick or whatever. That's your go-to. Is your family.
Well, I'll tell you one way he was involved. He was involved with helping me with how to do this type of stuff.
Oh, cool.
Like at the bottom. So
that's terrific.
Yeah, so that was big time. And I think like for my dream, my dream to the extent that we get there is for him to do the opening titles to my feature film.
That's awesome. That's terrific. Now, before I forget, I'm going to read off a bunch of places. And again, his name is Drew and the last name is spelled Bierut. He is on the following places: IMDb, Vimeo, LinkedIn, his Instagram, again, same name, Drew Bierut. And then of course, the website itself is beirutfilms.com. Is there anywhere else that you might be on social media?
Nowhere else that I would want you to discover. So that about covers it. Thank you so much, Cindy.
Thank you.